feeling betrayed and confused. Trust is shattered not necessarily because of infidelity, but because the entire foundation of the relationship feels like it was built on a false narrative. And for the individual living the dual life, there is often profound sorrow. Most do not set out to deceive. Rather, they are trapped in systems that never gave them safe permission to be honest. However, these stories are not just about pain. They are also about transformation. Many who come out of these dual lives eventually find clarity, peace, and freedom. The journey is rarely linear, and the losses can be deep, but so, too, can the growth. Acknowledging a secret identity is an act of courage, and facing its consequences can lead to a fuller, more integrated life. Internalized shame and mental health struggles, the silent battle within. Shame is a powerful, often invisible force. When it becomes cultural stigma or social rejection. Children, for example, who grow up being told they are too sensitive, too different, or simply not good enough, often internalize those messages as truth. In adulthood, they may struggle with low self-esteem, perfectionism, chronic self-doubt, and difficulty accepting love or kindness. The root is shame, but the symptoms ripple out in many forms. For those in the trying to earn worth through external validation. But no amount of achievement can heal a wound rooted in self-rejection. Healing from internalized shame requires more than self-help slogans or surface-level affirmations. It demands a process of deep self-compassion, emotional honesty, and often, therapeutic a job, a belief system, or even an identity we've outgrown, we are pushed into unfamiliar territory. It's in these moments of discomfort and uncertainty that new beginnings are born. And though they rarely arrive with clear instructions, these new paths often carry the seeds of our most powerful transformations. At its core, personal growth is the process of becoming more of who we truly are. It's not about becoming someone else. It's about shedding layers of fear, social expectation, and self-doubt that prevent our inner voice from being heard. This process can be triggered by life events that shake our foundation: a breakup, a move, a failure, or even a quiet realization that the life we're living doesn't reflect who we really are. New beginnings often emerge. We stop outsourcing our worth to others and begin anchoring it within ourselves. New beginnings don't guarantee perfection. In fact, they're often messy, full of false starts and stumbles. But that's part of the beauty. They allow us to be human. Each mistake is an opportunity to refine our direction. Each lesson learned adds to the strength of our character. Ultimately, personal growth and new beginnings are not linear, they're cycles. We will rise, fall, heal, and rise again, each time with more wisdom than before. And in that rhythm of becoming, we inch closer to a life that feels true, not just impressive. We start to trust ourselves more. We start to love the person we're becoming. Because every end is a threshold. And every threshold is an invitation, not just to move forward, but to evolve, to grow, to begin again, and again, and again. We've reached the end of this emotional, deeply personal exploration, but for many people, the journey we've talked about today is just beginning. Coming to terms with one's true identity, especially within the confines of a marriage built on heteronormative expectations, isn't just an internal revolution. It can ripple through families, friendships, children's lives, and entire communities. Let's be clear, people who come out later in life, after years of being perceived as straight, are not living inauthentically for the sake of deception. Many have spent a lifetime trying to conform to roles they never consciously chose. Maybe it was religious pressure. Maybe it was fear of losing love or being rejected. Maybe it was because, at the time, they lacked the vocabulary and support to even understand what they were feeling. For spouses of these individuals, the experience can be just as complex. Feelings of betrayal, confusion, sadness, and even empathy collide. It's not uncommon for couples in these situations to redefine their relationship, sometimes through divorce, sometimes through a new kind of companionship, and sometimes through a chosen family dynamic that defies traditional labels. What's most important to remember is that everyone involved is human. This isn't just about identity. It's about love, honesty, liberation, and healing. The silence that has surrounded these experiences for decades is finally breaking, and that's a good thing. Because when people are free to be who they really are, they not only begin to live more fully, but they also allow others around them to do the same. Until next time, stay real, stay kind, and stay true.